Hello, and thank you for joining us again. Today I want to talk about a popular proverb, Proverbs 31, commonly referred to as the Virtuous Woman. It was believed to be written by Solomon, a message that he got from his mother, which is interesting in itself because here we have a message from a man about women. But in actuality, it's a message from a woman to a man. Let's listen to an audio rendition of this proverb.
Proverbs 31. From the King James Version. The words of King Lemuel, the prophecy that his mother taught him.
What, my son? And what, the son of my womb? And what, the son of my vows? Give not thy strength unto women, nor thy ways to that which destroyeth kings. It is not for kings, O Lemuel, it is not for kings to drink wine, nor for princes strong drink. Lest they drink, and forget the law, and pervert the judgment of any of the afflicted. Give strong drink unto him that is ready to perish, and wine unto those that be of heavy hearts. Let him drink, and forget his poverty, and remember his misery no more. Open thy mouth for the dumb in the cause of all such as are appointed to destruction. Open thy mouth, judge righteously, and plead the cause of the poor and needy. Who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies. The heart of her husband doth safely trust in her, so that he shall have no need of spoil. She will do him good and not evil all the days of her life. She seeketh wool, and flax, and worketh willingly with her hands. She is like the merchant's ships, she bringeth her food from afar. She riseth also while it is yet night, and giveth meat to her household, and a portion to her maidens. She considereth a field, and buyeth it, with the fruit of her hands she planteth a vineyard. She girdeth her loins with strength, and strengtheneth her arms. She perceiveth that her merchandise is good, her candle goeth not out by night. She layeth her hands to the spindle, and her hands hold the distaff. She stretcheth out her hand to the poor, yea, she reacheth forth her hands to the needy. She is not afraid of the snow for her household, for all her household are clothed with scarlet. She make herself coverings of tapestry. Her clothing is silk and purple. Her husband is known in the gates, when he sitteth among the elders of the land. She make fine linen, and selleth it, and delivereth girdles unto the merchant. Strength and honor are her clothing, and she shall rejoice in time to come. She openeth her mouth with wisdom, and in her tongue is the law of kindness. She looketh well to the ways of her household, and eateth not the bread of idleness. Her children arise up, and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praiseth her. Many daughters have done virtuously, but thou excellest them all. Favor is deceitful, and beauty is vain. But a woman that feareth the Lord, she shall be praised. Give her of the fruit of her hands, and let her own works praise her in the gates.
We took our reading from the King James Version, and I used that for a particular reason. Verse 10, who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies. King James is one of the only versions that uses the phrase virtuous woman. Just about every other version identifies this woman as a wife. Even in the New King James Version, who can find a virtuous wife? The New American Standard Bible, an excellent wife, who can find? The New Living Translation, who can find a virtuous and capable wife? So most of the texts refer to the lady spoken of as a wife. As we stated, the Virtuous Woman is a very popular chapter. There are numerous books written and using this title of the Virtuous Woman, as well as a countless number of books written under the subject of Proverbs 31. There's even a very effective ministry known as the Proverbs 31 Ministries, geared to the spiritual growth of Christian women. And there has been countless sermons from the subject of the virtuous woman, becoming a virtuous woman, traits of a virtuous woman, the 7 virtues of a virtuous woman, how to be a virtuous woman, the 21st century virtuous woman, and so on and so on. Now, Proverbs 31 has many unique features to it. Let's start with the first verse, again using the King James Version. Verse 1 says, "The words of King Lemuel, the prophecy that his mother taught him." And the name Lemuel is repeated in verse 4. "It is not for kings, O Lemuel, it is not for kings to drink wine, nor for princes strong drink." Now, what's interesting about this verse is when we look through the history of the Israeli kings, there was no King Lemuel. It is still believed to be a reference to King Solomon. The name Lemuel means dedicated to God. So we have the words of the king dedicated to God, a prophecy that his mother taught him. Now, if this is Solomon, Solomon's mother was Bathsheba, which raises a provocative question. Was Bathsheba actually the author of the ideas portrayed in Proverbs 31? We're going to come back to this verse in a little bit. But let's talk about what proverbs are. What is a proverb? If we could just grab a working definition for the purposes of our study, a proverb is a short saying that expresses a truth or advice based on common and practical experiences, often using symbols and analogies. Many cultures, past and present, have and use proverbs, common sayings that meet this definition, including our own. If we take time, we could think of a few proverbs that you may have used or heard, such as, "You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink," or "A bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush." Now, with our definition, a short saying that expresses a truth or advice based on common and practical experiences, often using symbols and analogies. So, for example, let's take the proverb, "You can catch more flies with honey than with vinegar." Well, if we were to digest this proverb, we could possibly look at the idea that there are several different types of flies. There is the common housefly. There is a fruit fly. There's a horsefly, which of course doesn't look anything like this. We can also look at the variety of honey. There's raw and pure honey. There's processed honey. There's honey mustard, which of course isn't honey at all. But the proverbs we're looking at clearly has nothing to do with flies, and it's not about honey. It's using these symbols and analogies to express a truth. The truth being, you can usually get more positive results with niceness rather than being nasty. Proverbs is part of a genre of biblical literature known as poetry. And there are 5 notable books of the Old Testament that's classified as poetical literature. There's the book of Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Solomon. Now, there are other portions of poetry throughout the Old Testament. We find them in Lamentations and even in certain prophecies. But these are books that are dedicated and classified entirely as poetry. Now, Hebrew poetry is different from our contemporary poetry. Our poetry is usually based on rhyme and rhythm. So, for example, roses are red, violets are blue, sugar is sweet, and so are you. And of course, there's the master of poetry, Dr. Seuss. I do not like green eggs and ham. I do not like them, Sam I am. Rhyme and rhythm. Hebrew poetry, however, is based on what's known as parallelism, the lining up of two or more thoughts. Now, there are three basic types of parallelism in Hebrew poetry. One is called synonymous parallelism. Synonymous parallelism is when you have two thoughts that are basically saying the same thing, simply using different words. So, for example, Proverbs 15, a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. The same idea is conveyed, just using different words. Proverbs 16, pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. Proverbs 19, a false witness will not go unpunished, and whoever pours out lies will perish. Synonymous, saying the same thing in a different way. Then there is antithetical parallelism. Here, one thought is being contrasted by another thought. Proverbs 10:1, a wise son brings joy to his father, but a foolish son brings grief to his mother. Proverbs 12, the way of fools seems right to them, but the wise listen to advice. Proverbs 15, a gentle answer turns away wrath, but harsh words stirs up anger. Again, two thoughts contrasting each other to make its point. Then there is synthetic parallelism. Here you have one thought that is then built upon and expounded upon in the second thought. Proverbs 4, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. The second clause elaborates and builds on the first clause. Proverbs 16, commit to the Lord whatever you do, and he will establish your plans. Proverbs 20, a king's wrath strikes terror like the roar of a lion. Those who anger him forfeit their lives. Now, Proverbs 31, for the most part, uses synthetic parallelism. So, Proverbs 31, verse 13, she selects wool and flax and works with eager hands. Verse 14, she is like the merchant ships, bringing her food from afar. Verse 16, she considers a field and buys it. Out of her earnings, she plants a vineyard. And so we have Hebrew poetry using parallelism. Now, another feature that Hebrew poetry uses is known as alphabetic acrostics. Acrostics is a method when you use a particular letter of the alphabet to exemplify and illustrate another concept. We kind of use acrostics in our culture in a different sort of way. You might have heard sermons that went something like this. Today, we're going to speak about church. C is for community. H is for hope. U is for unity. R is for renewal. C for compassion. H for healing. Or another example, today's sermon is going to be on faith. F stands for focus. A is for assurance. I is for inspiration. T is for trust. H is for hope. Hebrew acrostics is somewhat different. There are several psalms that specifically use alphabetic acrostics. Psalm 25, Psalm 37, Psalm 111, Psalm 112, Psalm 119. There are 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. With these psalms, each verse uses one of the preceding letters of the alphabet. So verse 1 would use what is equivalent to our A. Verse 2 would use what's equivalent to our B, so forth and so on. Now, we can't see or recognize any of this in the English language, obviously, because they're using Hebrew letters. The clearest example of this is found in Psalm 119. We know it is the longest chapter of the Bible. It has 176 verses. In most Bible translations, they actually construct it in a certain way. There are 22 stanzas of 8 verses each. And oftentimes you would actually see the Hebrew letter above it. And in this psalm, verses 1 to 8 all start with the Hebrew letter for A. Each verse starts with our equivalent to the letter A. Verse 9 to 16, each verse starts with the Hebrew letter B, and so forth and so on throughout the entire psalm. Lamentations is another piece of poetical literature that uses alphabetic acrostics in a very unique way. Lamentations has 5 chapters. Chapters 1, 2, 4, and 5 have 22 verses. Chapter 3 has 3 times the amount, 66 verses. Chapters 1, 2, and 4, every verse is acrostic, going through the Hebrew alphabet. Chapter 3 has 3 times the amount. Every 3 verses is acrostic, going through the Hebrew alphabet. Chapter 5, even though it has 22 verses, for some mysterious reason does not use acrostics, but rather is a prayer of grief and sorrow. Now, coming to Proverbs 31, Hebrew reads from left to right. So verses 1 to 9 is a brief exhortation for correct behavior and conduct for the king. But when we come to the section of the virtuous woman, there are 22 remaining verses. Starting with verse 10, it starts with the Hebrew equivalent to the letter A. Verse 11, the Hebrew equivalent to our letter B, going through the entire Hebrew alphabet. This portion of the proverb deals with this virtuous woman. And It's an amazing read. Verse 11, her husband has full confidence in her and lacks nothing of value. The virtuous woman is trustworthy. Verse 17, she seeks wool and flax and works with willing hands. She's hardworking. Verse 27, she watches over the affairs of her household. She does not eat the bread of idleness. Verse 16, she considers a field and buys it. Out of her earnings, she plants a vineyard. She's resourceful. Verse 20, she opens her arms to the poor and extends her hands to the needy. She's compassionate. Verse 28, her children arise and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praises her. She's a supportive mother. The woman in this chapter is amazing. She's loving. She's trustworthy. Hardworking. She's sacrificial. Manages the household. She's confident, charitable, supportive, talented, creative, productive, strong, honorable, a godly woman. An amazing woman with outstanding achievements. What kind of woman does these kinds of things? Well, I'd like to suggest to you that the woman displayed in Proverbs 31 is not a woman at all. Let me make my case. If we're familiar with the story of Ruth, a book that's named after her, if we grab some of the verses from the Virtuous Woman and line them up with Ruth, beginning at verse 10, a wife of noble character. 11, her husband has full confidence in her. Verse 12, she brings him good, not harm, all the days of her life. Well, Ruth is not married. So those verses wouldn't really apply to her at all. Verse 13, she selects wool and flax and works with eager hands. Well, Ruth is poor. She doesn't have a job. Verse 15 and 16, she gets up while it is still night. She provides food for her family and portions for her female servants. She considers a field and buys it, and out of her earnings, she plants a vineyard. Again, she's not married. She doesn't have any children. She certainly doesn't have any female servants, and she has no money, and she is not running a business. So these verses would not apply to Ruth at all. Verse 22, she makes a covering for her bed. She is clothed with fine linen and purple. Again, Ruth is a poor widow. We find her gleaning in the fields, collecting scraps in order to eat and survive. So none of the traits or qualities of the so-called virtuous woman of Proverbs 31 would apply to Ruth at all. And yet, we read in the 3rd chapter, Naomi speaking, "And now, my daughter," referring to Ruth, "do not fear. I will do for you all that you request. For all the people of my town know that you are a virtuous woman." So while Ruth does not display any of the qualities or traits described in Proverbs 31, she is noted as a virtuous woman. Proverbs uses a virtuous woman to personify wisdom. In the opening chapters, Proverbs 1, verse 20, out in the open, wisdom calls aloud. She raises her voice in the public square. On top of the wall, she cries out. At the city gate, she makes her speech. How long will you who are simple love your simple ways? How long will mockers delight in mockery and fools hate knowledge? In Proverbs 9, wisdom has built her house. She has set up its 7 pillars. She has prepared her meat and mixes her wine. She has also set her table. She has sent out her servants, and she calls from the highest points of the city. It's not talking about a woman. It's talking about wisdom. Again, Proverbs 9, let all who are simple come to my house. To those who have no sense, she says, come, eat my food and drink the wine I have mixed. In Proverbs 8, virtually the entire chapter does the same thing, using a woman to personify wisdom. Looking through several of the verses, verse 1, does not wisdom call out? Does not understanding raise her voice? Verse 13, to fear the Lord is to hate evil. I hate pride and arrogance, evil behavior, and perverse speech. Verse 19, my fruit is better than fine gold. What I yield surpasses choice silver. Verse 12, the Lord brought me forth as the first of his works, before his deeds of old. I was formed long ago, at the very beginning, when the world came to be. When there was no watery depths, I was given birth. When there was no springs overflowing with water. Before the mountains were settled in place, before the hills, I was given birth. Verse 32, now then, my children, listen to me. Blessed are those who keep my ways. Again, not speaking of a woman at all, but wisdom personified as a virtuous woman. In the same way, Proverbs often uses a prostitute, a harlot, to personify folly and foolishness. Proverbs 9, verse 13, folly is an unruly woman. She is simple and knows nothing. She sits at the door of her house, on the seat at the highest point of the city, calling out those who pass by, who go straight on their way. Verse 16, let all who are simple come to my house. To those who have no sense, she says, stolen water is sweet. Food eaten in secret is delicious. Folly and foolishness personified. Proverbs 9 offers a profound contrast between these two ladies. Lady Wisdom, let all who are simple come to my house. To those who have no sense, she says, come eat my food and drink the wine I have mixed. Lady Folly says, let all who are simple come to my house. To those who have no sense, she says, stolen water is sweet. Food eaten in secret is delicious. So the virtuous woman of Proverbs 31 is wisdom personified. Verse 10, who can find a virtuous and capable wife? She is more precious than rubies. Proverbs 8:11, for wisdom is far more valuable than rubies. Nothing you desire can compare with her. Proverbs 31, verse 28, her children stand and bless her. Her husband praises her. Proverbs 8:11. And so, my children, listen to me, for all who follow my ways are joyful. Now, if we return to verse 1, the words of King Lemuel, the prophecy that his mother taught him. If the words of this proverb comes from the mother of the king dedicated to God, then even the mother here can be thought of as Mother Wisdom. Proverbs 4:7, wisdom is the principal thing, therefore get wisdom, and in all your getting, get understanding. Exalt her, and she will promote you. She will bring you honor when you embrace her. She will place on your head an ornament of grace, a crown of glory she will deliver to you.